Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Hockey Talk with TG podcast. I'm Ty Glenn. Hopefully, you guys are having a great Wednesday. Apologies for getting this episode out to you guys a little bit late than the normal show time at 11:30. Had a lot of stuff to do in the morning. Was unable to get my episode of my Hockey Talk TG podcast out then. Also, morning classes. So, I do apologize for that, but we are still doing an episode of the Hockey Talk with TG podcast, and we got lots of NHL news to discuss, so make sure that you stay tuned in to this episode until the end. Before we go ahead and get started, do me a favor, as always, go ahead, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube, and make sure that you're following the Hockey Talk TG podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. And like I said, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. We are with you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 11:30 a.m. to noon Central Time, 12:30 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So you want to make sure that you're staying up to date on the latest episodes of Hockey Talk TG podcast. Even though that this episode won't be coming out at 11:30 because, like I said, a lot of morning stuff I had to do, so I was unable to get an episode out. But still comes out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 11:30 a.m. to noon Central Time, and then you're listening to Eastern Time, 12:30 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So don't want to miss the episode of Hockey Talk TG podcast. So make sure that you are following wherever you listen to your podcast from, and yeah. But without further ado, we are going to go ahead and get started. So we're going to be recapping 3 of the Stanley Cup Playoff games that happened yesterday. We're not going to be recapping the Oilers and Kings because that game, to be honest, I did not watch it, and it did not stand out to me either kind of way. I did saw on my phone after the game, or I should say in the morning, because that's when I first saw it, that the Oilers won 3-1 against the Kings. They're up in the series 3-2. One went away from beating the Kings for the 4th straight year in the first round of Stanley Cup playoffs. That's all I can say on that, but we're not going to go too much into depth about the Oilers and Kings game. I believe Game 6 of that series is Friday or Thursday. It could be Thursday or Friday. I'm not 100% sure, but like I said, not going to go too much into depth about that game, but we'll see if the Oilers can get it done over LA, or will the Kings force a Game 7 back at home, which this loss overall did kind of surprise me for LA, considering how good and dominant they've been on home ice, and then they lose this one 3-1. So tough loss to the Oilers, but we'll see if they can win Game 6 on the road, force a Game 7 back at home. But to the game that I really wanted to get started on was the Battle of Ontario, Game 5 between the Ottawa Senators and the Toronto Maple Leafs. So Linus Ullmark, he makes 27 saves in the Senators 4-0 shutout win over the Toronto Maple Leafs. First playoff shutout for Linus Ullmark, and Toronto leads this best-of-7 series 3-2. So at the start of the Stanley Cup playoffs, I did predict the Senators to win in 7 games. I also said that Toronto is known for their first round exit issues. They're known for their first round struggles. In fact, they are 1-13 in playoff series clinching games, which with the only win being against the Tampa Bay Lightning in the first round of the 2023 Stanley Cup playoffs. But overall, it's just been a struggle for Toronto to get the job done in playoff clinching games. But for the Senators, Brady Tkachuk and Tim Stützle each had a goal and 2 assists for a 3-point night. Both of their goals ended up being empty netters to seal the deal. And Brady Tkachuk told the Senators fans in Game 4 after their overtime win against the Toronto Maple Leafs that we will be back here for Game 6. He stood on his word, and the Senators forced a Game 6 back in Ottawa for Thursday night. Tomas Chabot and Dylan Cousins scored their first Stanley Cup playoff goals. Dylan Cousins' goal ended up being a shorthanded goal. And like I said, Linus Ullmark made 27 saves in the shutout win. And for Anthony Stolarz, he made 15 saves in the loss. And like I said before, when it comes to playoff series clinching games for the Toronto Maple Leafs, they are 1-13 in playoff clinching series games, dating all the way back to 2018. So for some reason, they cannot get the job done. But we'll see if they can get the job done on the road Thursday night in Ottawa. And also, a fun fact about this, probably won't be a fun fact if you're a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, but the Maple Leafs also lost six straight potential series clinching games on home ice. And the only win, like I said, was in Game 6 of the 2023 Stanley Cup Playoffs in the first round, surprisingly, against the Tampa Bay Lightning. But we'll see what happens in Game 6 in Ottawa on Thursday as the Maple Leafs look to, yet again, finish the series and try to eliminate the Senators in 6 games and advance to the second round of the Stanley Cup Playoffs. Because I bet the Maple Leafs are saying, oh boy, here we go again. Because it's something with Toronto if they cannot just finish it off. So, but we'll see what happens in Game 6. The game will air on TBS for you guys to watch. And Game 6 is tomorrow at 6 o'clock p.m. Central Time in Ottawa. And like I said, this will air on TBS for you guys to watch. But moving on to the Devils and Hurricanes game. So, Sebastian Aho, he scores the double overtime game-winning goal as the Hurricanes complete the comeback and win 5-4 in double overtime against the Devils on Tuesday. He scored on the power play on a one-timer from the right face-off circle to win the game in double overtime. Prior to the power play, Dawson Mercer was called for a high-sticking penalty. A double minor high-sticking penalty against Jesperi Kotkaniemi. Jesperi Kotkaniemi went down on the ice. Nose was bleeding. Had to go back to the locker room. Hurricanes on the power play, and they win the game in double overtime. Sebastian Aho's second goal of the game, by the way, because he had 2 goals in this game, 1 in regulation, 1 in double overtime. He also had an assist for a 3-point night, so he's the first star of the game, in my opinion, for sure. And the Hurricanes overcame a 3-0 first period deficit to win 5-4 in overtime. And they win the series 4-1. And they face the winner of the series between the Washington Capitals and Montreal Canadiens, which the Capitals lead that best-of-7 series 3-1. Game 5 of that series is also today. We'll see if the Capitals can get it done in 5 games, or will the Canadiens force a Game 6 back in Montreal. And fun fact, Carolina became the 4th franchise in NHL history to win a playoff series in 7 consecutive postseasons. So, did not know that. I thought that was a fun fact to say on the podcast, because I'm pretty sure the majority of you guys didn't know that unless you're a diehard Hurricanes fan. But most of you guys probably didn't know that. So, I just thought maybe I can say it on the podcast. Taylor Hall, Jackson Blake, and Andrei Svechnikov also scored for Carolina. P.S. Taylor Hall signed a 3-year entry-level contract deal with the Carolina Hurricanes today, so he's going to be with the Canes for 3 more years. Obviously, as a Blackhawks fan, I wish him nothing but the best luck throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs. I know they won round 1 against the Devils, his former team. He actually won the Hart Memorial Trophy with the Devils in 2018. So I wish him nothing but the best going into the second round and throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs. Shane Gostisbehere and Seth Jarvis also had 2 assists in the game for the Hurricanes, and Pierre Kochetkov made 31 saves. And for the New Jersey Devils, Dawson Mercer, Timo Meier, Stefan Noesen, and Nico Hischier scored for New Jersey. Of course, Mercer, Myers, and Nosen's goal coming in the first period to have a 3-0 lead heading to the second. Nico Hischier eventually made it 4-3 after the Hurricanes tied it up. Before the Hurricanes tied it up at 4, Nico Hischier made it 4-3 after the Hurricanes came all the way back and tied the game up at 3. And then the Hurricanes tied it up again at 4 and set this game to overtime and double overtime. And Sebastian Aho wins the game. Jacob Markstrom, he made 49 saves in the loss. 15 of those saves came in the third period. 14 of those saves came in the first overtime. So after he let in that game-winning goal from Sebastian Aho, he was frustrated. He slammed his stick, and he was not happy, as it should be. And the main problem of why the Devils lost this series, and I kind of knew that they were going to lose this series, but the main problem was because of the injuries. key injuries for the Devils. Jack Hughes was out. Luke Hughes was out. Cody Glass was out. He did play Game 5 yesterday, though. Brendan Dillon out. Jonathan Kovacevic out. So they had a lot of injury problems on paper, something that they could not get away from. And another reason why that they lost was because of their power play. In their power play, they were 0 for 15 in the series on the power play. Could not even get a power play goal. 0 for 15. And it kind of makes sense because the Hurricanes have the best penalty kill in the league. First in the penalty kill in the regular season. So, to me, this wasn't a surprise because of that reason. But I just felt like because of the injuries now piling up on the Devils, that's why they lost the series. And even if they did have Jack Hughes and Luke Hughes and some of the other key players in the lineup, they still would have lost the series. The Hurricanes are just between the Hurricanes and the Devils, I should say, the Hurricanes are too stacked of a team to bet against. So even if the Devils did have Jack Hughes in the lineup, I still would have went with the Hurricanes to win the series. But that's just my main problem why the Devils did lose the series, because of the injuries and the power play wasn't converting. But let me know you guys' thoughts on this. I'm pretty sure you will agree with me. At least most of you would. But let me know you guys' thoughts. Why do you think the Devils lost the series? But I'm pretty sure it's obvious of why they lost the series. But if you have a different opinion, just let me know down in the comments below. But moving on to Game 5 of the Vegas Golden Knights and Minnesota Wild. Brett Howland, he scored the overtime game-winning goal as the Golden Knights win 3-2 in overtime against the Wild, and they take a 3-2 series lead. Brett Howland roofed a one-timer from the bottom left circle. He was all alone in the slot, and he ripped it from the left circle off the backhand pass from Tanner Pearson to win in overtime. William Karlsson and Mark Stone also scored for Vegas in this game. Jack Eichel had 2 assists for the Golden Knights, and Adin Hill made 20 saves. And for the Minnesota Wild, the Stars were in Vegas tonight as Krill the Thrill Kaprizov and Matt Boley scored for Minnesota. And Joe Eriksson Ek had 2 assists for the Wild. And Philip Gustafsson made 23 saves. He actually did leave this game in the second period because of an illness. He was replaced by Marc-Andre Fleury, who made 6 saves on 7 shots faced the net, which he did set an NHL record with his 18th playoff appearance. It did seem like the Minnesota Wild was going to win this game in regulation, as Ryan Hartman had a possible goal to get the Wild a 3-2 lead with almost a minute left in regulation. But then the referees challenged it for kicking motion, and they didn't see no kicking motion. The puck actually went off the shin pad of Ryan Hartman and into the net. There was no kicking motion on the play, so the referees called it a good goal. But the Golden Knights said, They did the no finger, the Dikembe Mutombo wave, and they challenged the goal for offside. So after the referees said that it was a good goal, there was no kicking motion on the play, the Golden Knights, they challenged it for offside. And it turns out it was offside, so the goal was taken off, and it was still 2-2. The game going to overtime, and Brett Howland won the game for the Vegas Golden Knights. So a lot of emotions on both sides in that final minute of the third period, but the Golden Knights came away with the win. Great challenge from head coach Bruce Cassidy, and now the VGK has a 3-2 series lead heading into Game 6 on Thursday. St. Paul, Minnesota, where the Golden Knights can close it out in 6 games, while looking to force a Game 7 in Vegas on Thursday night. That'll be at 6:30 p.m. Central Time, and the game will air on ESPN for you guys to watch. But moving on, so this is some general NHL news I want to discuss. Mike Sullivan, he's going to be parting ways with the Pittsburgh Penguins. This was announced on Monday. I told you guys I would talk about it in Wednesday's episode of the Hockey Talk GG podcast, and that's what I'm doing. And Penguins general manager Kyle Dubas said that it was, quote unquote, time for a change. And the Penguins, they missed the playoffs for the 3rd consecutive year, finishing with a 34, 36, and 12 record with 80 points. 7th in the Metro. And fun fact, this was the fewest points the Penguins had in an 82-game season since the 2005-2006 season, in which they were 22, 46, and 14 with 58 points. And Mike Sullivan had 2 years remaining on his contract deal, which was extended in 2022. He coached the Penguins for 10 seasons, second longest 10-year coach in the NHL behind John Cooper, the Tampa Bay Lightning, which he's coached the Lightning for 13 seasons. And take a look at Mike Sullivan's stats in his 10 years coaching the Pittsburgh Penguins: 409, 255, and 89 record with the Pittsburgh Penguins in 10 seasons as their head coach. He was 44 and 38 in playoff games with the Penguins, and he also led the Penguins to back-to-back Stanley Cups in 2016 and 2017. And fun fact, Mike Sullivan's 409 wins is a Penguins franchise record for a head coach. So, congratulations. And there is a lot of NHL teams looking for head coaches. You got the Boston Bruins. You got the Chicago Blackhawks. You got the Philadelphia Flyers, Anaheim Ducks, Seattle Kraken, New York Rangers. And let's not forget the Vancouver Canucks, because Rick Tocchet is not returning as their head coach anymore, which I'll get into that in a second. So you got all these teams looking for head coaches. Some people, or I should say most people, even say that Mike Sullivan might be head coach of the Boston Bruins or New York Rangers, which Boston Bruins would probably be no surprise. I think he was the assistant coach for the Boston Bruins before, and also he's born in Massachusetts, so it wouldn't surprise me that Mike Sullivan will be the Bruins head coach, but some people say he might be the New York Rangers head coach. Of course, New York Rangers fired Peter Laviolette as their head coach, so he could be head coach of the New York Rangers, but we would just have to see. Or, as a Blackhawks fan, I don't mind Mike Sullivan coming to us. I know there's a lot of people, and I know some of my friends told me this, that Mike Sullivan is not the right type of coach for us. And I can understand why they said that, because Mike Sullivan is a winning head coach. But as a Blackhawks fan, you got to understand that the Blackhawks need to take the next step. They need to win some games, and Mike Sullivan can do that. But most people were predicting that David Carl will be the new head coach of the Chicago Blackhawks. But we all know how that story went down. I talked about that on Monday's episode of Hockey Talk TG Podcast. If you missed it, you want to go ahead and check that out, because I did talk about that on Monday's episode of Hockey Talk TG Podcast. He did withdraw his coaching position of the Chicago Blackhawks. But you know the saying, whenever a door closes, there's always a new one that opens. And Mike Sullivan, even though he's not a developing type coach. It's almost a tongue twister right there. Even though he's not a developing type head coach, he's more of a winning coach. The Blackhawks could still use him to be their head coach. I mean, we saw what he did with Sidney Crosby, and of course Connor Bedard grew up watching Sidney Crosby, so he could use some of the same lessons he did for Sidney Crosby on Connor Bedard. So yeah, even though he's not, David Carl, I still think he can be a great head coach for the Chicago Blackhawks. But let me know you guys' thoughts. Who do you think Mike Sullivan could be a great head coach for? Which NHL team could we most likely see him going to, or could we see him going to? Let me know you guys' thoughts in the comments below. Obviously, like I said, a lot of NHL teams in coaching searches. We don't know what's going to be next for Mike Sullivan. I already stated my thoughts on this and my in-depth analysis on this. I want to hear you guys' thoughts. You guys might have some interesting answers about that too. And if you do, just drop them down in the comments below. I will respond back to each of your answers the best way I can. We'll see if I agree or disagree with your answers, or if you guys disagree or agree with my answer. Doesn't matter. It's hockey, great sport in the world, and we're having a conversation. So yeah. But speaking of head coaches moving on from their teams, like I mentioned already, Rick Tocchet is not going to be returning as the Canucks head coach for the start of the 2025-26 season. He announced that he would not. He actually announced that he would not return as the head coach of the Canucks. So the Canucks didn't fire him as the head coach. He said that he wasn't going to be the head coach of the Canucks anymore. And this is what he said on the announcement, and I quote, I'm choosing to move on from the Vancouver Canucks. Family is a priority, and with my contract lapsing, this becomes the opportune time. While I don't know where I'm headed or exactly how this will play out for me over the near term, I feel like this is the right time for me to explore other opportunities in and around hockey. So, always thinking about the family, which is a great thing to think about. You always got to think about your family and what's next for them, or what's the best choice for them. And this decision caught Canucks president of hockey operations Jim Rutherford by surprise. Of course, many of you know, I think he was part of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Helped the Penguins win the Stanley Cup in 2009, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Or he did help the Penguins win the Stanley Cup overall. But correct me if I'm wrong. I think he has some role to play with the Pittsburgh Penguins. But anyway, Jim Rutherford said that he got a call on Tuesday morning, first from Rick Tocchet's agent, and then Tocchet himself explained the decision. But no immediate coach was named. No immediate coach replacement was named. So the Canucks, like I said, still one of those teams in the coaching search. But the Canucks finished the 2024-25 season with a 38-30-14 record with 90 points. Fifth in the Pacific Division, 6 points out of a playoff spot. And during Rick Tocchet was hired as the Canucks head coach on January 22nd, 2023, replacing Bruce Boudreau, who's now analyst for NHL Network. He coached the Canucks for 3 seasons. In his 3 seasons, he had a 108, 65, and 27 record. But in the 2023-24 season, which probably would have been his most standout season as Canucks head coach, because he led the Canucks to a Pacific Division title, and he was also awarded the Jack Adams Award, which is named to the NHL Head Coach of the Year. And the Canucks finished with a 50-23-9 record with 109 points that season. They went all the way to the second round of the 2024 Stanley Cup Playoffs, and then they got eliminated by the Edmonton Oilers in 7 games. But it'll be interesting to see where does Rick Tocchet end up next. Maybe he could be head coach of the Flyers, maybe head coach of the Bruins. We'll just have to see what the cards have in store for Rick Tocchet. But moving on to Connor Hellebuyck. So Game 5 of the Jets and Blues playoff series is today. But we got to talk about the issues for Connor Hellebuyck. So the 31-year-old goalie was pulled in back-to-back games against the St. Louis Blues in Game 3 and Game 4, which, of course, Game 3 was a 7-2 loss to the Blues, and in Game 4, 5-1 loss to the Blues. He was pulled in both of those games, and his save percentage actually went down. So it went up, and then it went down. Game 1 save percentage, he had a .824 save percentage in Game 1, .955 save percentage in Game 2, .760 save percentage in Game 3, and .722 save percentage in Game 4. So his save percentage was going up and down, almost like a roller coaster. But Connor Hellebuyck said himself that he's confident that he's going to be better for Game 5. He said this, and I quote, "I studied goaltending extremely hard. I probably studied the most out of anyone in this world, so I know what I need to do and how to get my best game. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I got 2 days here. Time to bring it to Game 5. He also added this, and I quote, "When I'm watching my game, there's a certain way I need it to look and want it to look, and it will be crazy to go that many regular season games and all of a sudden switch up something in the playoffs. You don't win 47 games and then come to the playoffs, switch everything up. I know how it needs to be looked or done. I know how it needs to be done. I like a lot of things, and I'm not going to go and make huge changes. That being said, I'm going to be better. That's my job, and that's the foot that I'm putting forward." But overall, the Jets need to improve their defensive play heading into Game 5, because Games 3 and Games 4 on the road in St. Louis were just not it. And as a Blackhawks fan, I picked the Jets to win the series. I actually picked them to win the series in 6 games. Could they possibly do that? Who knows? But if they don't get it together, and it pains me to admit this as a Blackhawks fan, the Blues will win this series against the Jets if they don't get it together. Matter of fact, if the Jets lose Game 5, it's a game over. They're done. the Blues winning the series in 6 games if they lose Game 5 tonight. But we'll just have to see what happens. That will come on at 8:30 p.m. Central Time on ESPN for you guys to watch. And speaking of Connor Hellebuyck, him, Darcy Kemper, and Andrei Vasilevsky were named Vezina Trophy finalists on, was it Monday, Tuesday? So they were named Vezina Trophy finalists on Monday. I believe it was Monday because they did announce the Norris Trophy Award finalists on Tuesday. And then the Ted Lindsay Award finalists on Wednesday, which I'll talk about that in Friday's episode, mostly because I didn't have time to discuss it in Wednesday's episode. But for those who don't know, the Vezina Trophy is awarded to the NHL's top goaltender. And taking a look at Connor Hellebuyck's stats, he led the NHL with 47 wins, 8 shutouts, and a 2.00 goals against average. And he ranked second with a .925 save percentage in 63 games. He allowed 2 goals or fewer in 40 games and 1 or fewer in 27 games during the season. He helped the Jets win the President's Trophy with a 56-22-4 record, allowing an NHL low 191 goals, including shootout deciding goals. He also won the William and Jennings Trophy, which of course is awarded to the goaltender or goaltenders playing a minimum of 25 games for the team, allowing the fewest goals. All right, moving on to Darcy Kemper. Taking a look at his stats, he is a first-time Vezina finalist. He posted a 31-11-7 record with a 2.02 goals against average and a .922 save percentage in 50 games, tying his personal best with 5 shutouts. He helped the Kings finish second in the Pacific Division, allowing the second fewest goals, which is 206, in the league. For Andrei Vasilevsky, he went 30-20-5 with a 2.18 goals against average and a .921 save percentage. He has 6 shutouts this season, facing the second most shots, 1,716, and making the second most saves with 1,581. He's tied for second in the NHL with 6 shutouts. And this is the 5th time that Andrei Vasilevsky is a Vezina Trophy finalist. He won the award in 2019, and during the 2018-19 season, he had a 39-10-4 record with a 2.40 goals against average and a .925 save percentage and 6 shutouts. My prediction on who will win the award, I think it has to go to Connor Hellebuyck, mostly because of what he and the Jets did this season. I know the Jets are in a little bit of a pickle right now with the St. Louis Blues, but Connor Hellebuyck has had a heck of a year. Absolutely deserves to win the Vezina Trophy, setting NHL records all over the paper. It should go to Connor Hellebuyck. But moving on to the Norris Trophy picks. So Quinn Hughes, Cale Makar, Zach Werenski, all named Norris Trophy finalists on Tuesday. Of course, as you guys don't know, this award goes out to the NHL's top defenseman and is voted by the Professional Hockey Writers Association. But let's dive into it now, shall we? Quinn Hughes is a finalist for the second consecutive year after winning the Norris Trophy last season. He recorded 76 points in 68 games played this season, 16 goals, 60 assists for 76 points in 68 games played, which matches career best 1.12 points per game. And on March 22nd, he reached 400 career NHL points, becoming the second defenseman in Canucks history to do so. Alexander Edler obviously being the first. And Quinn Hughes tied Alexander Edler's record for most points by Canucks defenseman in fewer than half the games that Alexander Edler had played. So I thought that was a pretty cool note to say on the podcast. But moving on to Cale Makar, who's one of my favorite defensemen in the NHL to watch. I do like watching Quinn Hughes as well, but I think Cale Makar has to be my number 1 favorite defenseman to watch. But Cale Makar, he is a 5-time finalist for the Norris Trophy. He won the Norris Trophy Award in 2022, the same year that he won the Stanley Cup with the Colorado Avalanche. And he led all defensemen with 92 points in 80 games played this season, 30 goals, 62 assists for 92 points in 80 games played. And his 30 goals made him the first defenseman since Mike Green in 2008-2009 to reach that mark. And also, Cale Makar became the first defenseman since Paul Coffey and Al McInnes in the early 1990s to have back-to-back 90-point seasons. And also, Cale Makar's achievement of 30 goals places him among an elite group of defensemen, being the 9th defenseman in NHL history to reach that milestone in a single season. He set career highs with 12 power play goals, 2 shorthanded goals, and 246 shots on goal. And he averaged 25 minutes and 43 seconds of ice time per game, ranking 3rd in the league. So he's done it all. But he could possibly win the Norris Trophy. We'll just have to see. Moving on to Zach Werenski. Zach Werenski is a first-time finalist for the award, finishing 2nd among defensemen with 82 points. 23 goals, 59 assists for 82 points this season. He set franchise record in all 3 categories. He led the NHL with an average ice time of 26 minutes and 45 seconds per game and ranked 3rd among all skaters with 298 shots on goal. My prediction, who should get the award, I'm most likely leaning towards Cale Makar to get the award, but I feel like it should go to Zach Werenski. I mean, most of me, I would probably say 95% of me says Cale Makar should get the award, but then the 5% of me says maybe it could be Zach Werenski, considering the season that he had with the Blue Jackets. He had a unbelievable season with Columbus. But like I said, I have 95% of me saying that Cale Makar should get the award. And then the other 5% of me, just part of me thinks that maybe Zach Werenski should get it. But who knows? Let me know you guys' thoughts down below in the comments of who you think should get this award. Like I said, I'm most likely leaning towards Cale Makar. I think he should get the award, but something tells me that maybe Zach Werenski should get it. But who knows? All right, Stanley Cup Playoff games on the slate for today. So there's only 3 Stanley Cup Playoff games on the slate, starting with Game 5 of the Washington Capitals and Montreal Canadiens at 6 o'clock p.m. Central Time. This will air on ESPN for you to watch. Capitals lead this best-of-7 series 3-1. If they win this game, they face the Carolina Hurricanes in round 2 of the Stanley Cup Playoffs. If the Canadiens win, it's a Game 6 back in Montreal. And then we got Game 5 of the Florida Panthers and Tampa Bay Lightning, the Battle of Florida, at 6:30 p.m. Central Time. This will air on ESPN2. Panthers lead this best-of-7 series 3-1. No Aaron Ekblad in this game. In fact, he was suspended 2 games for his hit on Brandon Hagel, which was an elbow hit, and it caught Brandon Hagel in the chin. And because of that, Brandon Hagel is not going to be playing Game 5. And obviously, the referees did not call a penalty on that hit, which that should have been a 5-minute major for that hit. And John Cooper was irate on the call. But then, since the penalty wasn't called, Tampa Bay Lightning scored 2 goals in 11 seconds in that period to lead 2-1 before the Panthers won 4-2. And I never seen John Cooper that fired up after that penalty call, and even after the Tampa Bay Lightning scored those 2 goals in 11 seconds in Game 4, I never seen him this fired up before. In fact, I probably say, like, speaking on that, first time I ever seen him that fired up. I never, ever seen John Cooper that fired up in Game 4. He could bring that same energy in Game 5. We will just have to see. The Lightning can force a Game 6 back in Sunrise. But obviously, Battle of Florida, probably my second favorite Stanley Cup Playoff series so far. First one's got to be the Battle of Ontario. And then the final game of the night, we got Game 5 of the St. Louis Blues and Winnipeg Jets at 8:30 p.m. Central Time. This will air on ESPN. That series is tied up at 2 games apiece after the Blues winning both Games 3 and Game 4 on home ice to tie the series up at 2. Obviously, we talked about Connor Hellebuyck's struggles in the podcast. In this episode already, we talked about how the Jets need to improve in Game 5. Could they implement that? We'll just have to see. But like I said, if the Blues win Game 5, it's over just like that. There's no coming back from the Winnipeg Jets. It's not going to be a Game 7 if the Blues win Game 5. It is over. Blues in 6. And I have to admit that as a Blackhawks fan. Alright, so just a couple of things that I saw that we're not going to be discussing too much about. 2025 NHL Draft Lottery is set to be, it's going to be held on May the 5th, so that'll be on Monday, and I'll talk about the Draft Lottery then. Obviously, May 5th episode of the Hockey Talk TG podcast will be 1 year that I have done the Hockey Talk TG podcast, because I started the podcast. For those of you who were with me from the very beginning, I started the podcast on May 5th of 2024. May 5th, 2025 will complete 1 year that I have done the Hockey Talk with TG podcast. And I already have 100 plus episodes out of the Hockey Talk TG podcast. But we'll talk about the draft lottery then. Obviously, the Sharks with the best odds at drafting number 1 overall pick. Could it be Could it be Matthew Shafir? Could it be James Higgins? Could it be Michael Misa? Could it be Porter Martin? Who knows? And then also, PWHL is going to be selecting Seattle for their second expansion franchise, and it plans to grow 10 teams for the start of the 2026-27 season. They already have Vancouver as an expansion franchise. Now they're going to be going to Seattle for another franchise. So obviously PWHL is certainly growing, and it's going to be great for the game of hockey and for women's hockey overall. And also, Nikita Kucherov, Cale Makar, and Nathan McKinnon were named Ted Lindsay Award finalists. We'll talk about that on Friday's episode of Hockey Talk TG podcast. I'm going to be honest with you guys, this is the first time that I've ever seen a defenseman being a finalist for the Ted Lindsay Award. It's usually Forrest. For me, it's usually Forrest that I see that are finalists for this award. Cale Makar ends up being a finalist for this award. First time I ever seen a defenseman for a finalist for the Ted Lindsay Award. But we'll talk about that on Friday. We'll talk about the NHL draft lottery on Monday. We'll also bring up about the PWHL expansion on Friday's episode of Hockey Talk TG podcast. So on Friday, we'll talk about the Ted Lindsay Award finalists. We'll talk about the PWHL. And then on Monday's episode, we'll talk about the 2025 NHL draft lottery. So make sure that you stay tuned in for the Hockey Talk TG podcast for Friday's episode and Monday's episode. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Hockey Talk with TG podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in as always. Really do appreciate it. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe on YouTube, and make sure that you follow the Hockey Talk TG podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. And you subscribe to the YouTube channel. We are with you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 11:30 a.m. to noon Central Time, 12:30 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Like I said, getting this episode out in the afternoon because I wasn't able to do it in the morning. Apologies for that. But yeah, hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day. God first as always. Be blessed. I'll see you guys Friday for another episode of the Hockey Talk with TG podcast. Take care.